There are moments in history when even modern power pauses, not out of fear of weapons or war or political fallout, but because of something older, something that has no language in intelligence briefings and no column in risk assessments. In 1964, during a carefully orchestrated diplomatic mission to Egypt, Soviet Prime Minister Alexei Kosygin was scheduled to tour a royal tomb in the Valley of the Kings. It was meant to be symbolic, a gesture of cultural respect, a quiet walk into the deep past. But before that visit could take place, an urgent telegram arrived from the headquarters of the KGB. The message was unusually direct. They advised him not to enter the tomb. Not because of political unrest, not because of structural danger, but because of the curse of the Pharaohs. The message stated plainly that protection could not be guaranteed. No explanation was offered. Kosygin cancelled the visit without public comment. For a government that officially rejected superstition, this quiet decision speaks volumes. Because the curse, whether believed or not, has a way of inserting itself into the record, not as a legend, but as a pattern. And that pattern became impossible to ignore. In 1922, when the sealed tomb of Tutankhamun was opened, what followed was not a single tragedy, but a sequence, a slow accumulation of unease, deaths, illnesses, coincidences, and warnings that refused to remain silent. Tonight, we are not chasing myths. We are examining 5 documented moments where the boundary between ancient belief and modern reality became dangerously thin. Not to prove the curse exists, but to understand why, more than a century later, it still commands respect. The first moment does not begin in antiquity. It begins with sound. Among the objects buried with Tutankhamun were 2 ceremonial trumpets, one of silver, one of bronze. They were not decorative. In temple reliefs, similar instruments appear in scenes of ritual mobilization, calls to the gods, calls to war. For decades, the trumpets were preserved, untouched, silent, until August 31st, 1939. On that evening, the BBC arranged a live radio broadcast from Cairo. The goal was simple: to let the modern world hear a sound that had not been heard for over 3,000 years. Almost immediately, things went wrong. The recording equipment failed. Technicians reported unexplained malfunctions. The broadcast was delayed. When the issues were finally resolved, a conservator raised the silver trumpet and played it. The sound was thin, almost mournful. It lasted only a few minutes. Within 24 hours, Britain and France declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. At the time, few made the connection, but it did not end there. In later decades, the trumpet was played again and again. Each time, it was followed by conflict, regional wars, political collapses, social upheaval. In 2011, Egypt itself descended into unrest shortly after another recorded sounding. The timing was noted by Egypt's former Antiquities Minister, Zahi Hawass, who described the coincidence with visible discomfort. There is no scientific mechanism linking a musical instrument to geopolitical catastrophe, and yet the pattern persists. Some researchers believe the trumpet was never meant to be played for entertainment. Others argue the human mind simply searches for meaning in chaos. But the trumpet remains locked away, and no one is in a hurry to hear it again. The second moment carries the curse far from the Nile, across the ocean, into the cold, dark waters of the Atlantic. For over a century, rumors have persisted that the RMS Titanic carried more than luggage and passengers. That deep within its cargo was an Egyptian artifact known as the Princess of Amen-Ra. Despite the name, it was not a mummy. It was a decorated coffin lid, and according to early museum records, it had a troubling history. Before reaching Europe, those who handled the object reportedly experienced accidents and sudden illness. Transport vehicles malfunctioned, handlers were injured. The artifact eventually entered the collection of the British Museum, where staff quietly noted its reputation. According to later accounts, the object was being transferred to the United States in 1912, loaded aboard the Titanic. One of the ship's passengers, the journalist and spiritualist William Stead, reportedly spoke of a cursed Egyptian relic on board, warning fellow travelers days before the collision. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, survivors described confusion on the bridge, delayed responses, moments of hesitation that made little sense to seasoned sailors. No official cargo manifest confirms the artifact's presence, and historians remain divided. But the story refuses to fade. Not because it proves anything, but because it fits too neatly into a much older narrative that sacred objects, once removed from their context, do not remain passive. The third moment brings us back to Egypt, not to museums or archives, but to the present day. In rural regions near ancient burial grounds, there is a word still spoken quietly: Rasad, a guardian. Not symbolic, not metaphorical, but described as an active presence bound to a tomb. According to local belief, these guardians were invoked by priests to protect sacred spaces, not just from thieves, but from history itself. Those who claim to have encountered the Rasad describe figures that do not belong to any single mythology, shapes that shift, forms that feel assembled from fear rather than flesh. Anthropologists have documented 4 recurring descriptions: a serpent-headed female figure, a towering dark presence associated with insatiable hunger, a small, watchful form guarding inner chambers, and a composite beast resembling the ancient devourer of the dead. There is no evidence these entities exist, but there is evidence of what belief in them has caused. Illegal excavations, desperate rituals, people attempting to negotiate with something they do not understand. Modern authorities have documented cases where superstition drove individuals to commit acts they later could not explain. The curse, in this sense, does not kill directly. It persuades. It transforms ancient fear into modern tragedy. And it reminds us that belief itself can be dangerous. The fourth moment pulls us away from spirits and back toward biology. Sealed tombs are not empty spaces. They are ecosystems. For thousands of years, organic offerings decomposed in darkness. Food, wine, textiles. When a tomb is opened, that air is released. Along with it come spores, bacteria, toxic compounds. Scientists have identified fungi capable of causing severe respiratory failure, neurological symptoms, hallucinations. In some cases, death. To an ancient observer, these symptoms would look like punishment. To a modern doctor, they are exposure. Some researchers argue this is the true origin of the curse. Not magic, but microbiology. Yet even this explanation leaves questions unanswered. Why did symptoms appear selectively? Why did some survive untouched? And why did deaths cluster around moments of disturbance rather than exposure alone? Science explains the mechanism. It does not explain the timing. The final moment is smaller, quieter, and perhaps the most unsettling. In 1990, a European physician, known in records only as Dr. Louis, was gifted a mummified human hand. It was presented as a curiosity, an artifact from the Amarna period, linked to the reign of Akhenaten. Soon after, the doctor reported disturbances. Not dramatic, not cinematic, subtle. The sensation of being watched. Vivid dreams. Physical marks with no medical explanation. Seeking relief, he turned to religious texts and rituals he barely understood. Witnesses later described a final attempt to destroy the artifact. Fire, smoke, a sudden loss of power. Dr. Louis survived, but he never fully recovered. Doctors attributed his condition to stress. Others whispered different explanations. There is no proof the hand was cursed, but the story endures, because it mirrors something ancient, a warning against possession, against ownership, against assuming that the past is inert. The curse of the Pharaohs does not announce itself. It does not strike immediately. It waits, sometimes as coincidence, sometimes as infection, sometimes as belief. It lives in the space between cause and meaning, between science and story. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding is thinking the curse was meant to punish. Ancient texts suggest something else: protection, preservation, a demand for distance. The Pharaohs sought eternity, not through fear, but through boundaries. And maybe the curse is simply this: a reminder that some places are not abandoned, some silence is intentional, and some doors, once opened, never truly close.